Welcome back to the Red Car Learning Path. This is the second video in a Tableau introduction with field monitoring data. We left off looking at Tableau and a sense of the Tableau Creator software, Tableau Desktop, and roughly how to use it. I'm going to continue where I left off and just talk a little bit about a little bit more just to get you familiar with how Tableau Desktop can work. There's lots and lots more you can learn, but some more tips and tricks that I wanted to share before we get to cleaning data. So before I mentioned we imported one CSV file, and this used to live here. Let me actually just put that back. So this is the humidity one. So this one, for instance, was sitting here, and we had these three data sets. It found in the same folder all these other CSVs, and you actually can, right here inside Tableau, use this what's called a union and pull in multiple files. You can actually drag over here. I'm manually doing this. You could have clicked wildcard, but basically you can pull in all the CSVs and it will attempt to merge them together. And we'll see a little bit later in Tableau Prep that this is the same thing Tableau Prep does, but effectively you're just doing this right here inside Tableau, and now you have all these CSV files together. The data source view, you can start to see where time, it did find that time was a union column. Same name existed in all of them, which is nice. And we can see here that there's some data at this timestamp, and there's no data for these other fields. They're all set to null at these other timestamps. So I'm just going to jump back here. So now we can actually start to see all of the different data streams that we have. And here again, it's just our average temperature data. And I wanted to, what do I want to do? I want to demonstrate a few things. So let's talk about data overlays. So we'll talk a little bit about how to plot multiple data sets on the same chart, and then we'll start and look at how to plot all the data points in a set. And instead of using time, maybe we'll use bins or something else. So for starters, let's talk about how to put multiple data on one chart. So before, let's say we did, and I'm just kind of picking random data here as a demonstration, but let's say we wanted CO2. I'm going to set this to be the average. And so great, it's down here, but we really want to kind of better see this. Maybe I change CO2 to be orange. But let's say we did want to, and let's zoom in on the data. Maybe we'll actually pick a month, day, year, and we can pick a specific day just for purposes. So let's say we want to see this on this plot, on the same chart. You can right click on the right pill and do dual axis, and that gives you the ability for them to be overlaid. You can now see here, this is on the right side axes, left side axes, and they're overlaid. They have temperature, or sorry, color is basically showing us which one is which. And so this, you can now see they kind of split these two cells. And so you can only do that for two different, left side, right side. You can't really add any more data to this plot in particular. You could make things larger or smaller based on another set of data, but if we wanted to have kilowatts, below it, or we would need to, maybe put these on their own chart here where they're now sharing one chart. So that's the shortcut to putting things on dual axis. In this instance, here I plotted these two, they're fan coils. They both have kilowatts. You actually can normalize them to have the same axis. You can say synchronize, and now 0.3 lines up with 0.3. So for things that have the same data field, this is different, but where they are the same like this, you can force them to have the same axis by right-clicking. And then what I like to often do is actually to uncheck show header. At least that forced it off here, but I usually do that when the left and right are the same X or the same Y axis here of power. So I'm going to undo that. So that's how to overlay two sets of data on one chart. I'm going to go to another spreadsheet here and bring back time. And now what we're going to actually do is look at how to put multiple data sets on a single chart. So to do that, there's these wildcards at the bottom. So we can see this measure values. And I'm going to drag measure values to the rows column. And what it immediately does is it adds, I think, about 10 different pills, the top 10 data sets just here in this measure values column. And so now what we can do is I'm actually going to remove this number of records. I don't need that one. But now we can actually see all of these different data sets are on one chart. Values ranging all over the place. It's summing all the data, so I can click this magical measure values, change it to average, and it will change all of these to average. And what this did was it actually created a new filter here called measure names. And if we were to show this filter, it's actually this same list of pills that's over here is the ones that are checked over here. So if I was to select, I think I could add, for instance, you can add the sum for CO2 as well as here's the average, but I'm going to turn that off for now. So you can see the measure values, and I'm going to keep it as a filter, and then I'm actually going to drag it to be colors. So we can use that now. Now we can start to see colors, which ones are which. We can even click on this little label it makes us, and it will highlight our data if that just helps us visually look at it. So this is just a way to get lots of things on one chart. They all have to have the same mark. So if we did circles, they'll all turn to little tiny circles here in a second. But that's a very powerful tool. So use this as much as you need to be able to overlay data sets and look at things. Another trick about looking at data that may not be as intuitive, let's say instead of looking at it against time, we wanted to look at the frequency and spread of the, let's say, the temperature in this room. So, right now it's just going to sum all of the temperature data. And what we can actually do is we can make a new data field. We can actually right-click temperature and we can make bins where we say, I want to see the temperature every 5. Let's see, the min is 65 degrees, the max is 85. So I want to see temperature every 5 degrees. It's going to make some bins. We can put those on columns. And now we can see we have data 60, 65, 70, 75, 80. And I'm now going to drag my temperature here. I'm going to change it to be the average. It's in bar graph by default, but let's make it in circles. So now we can see that all of this data, we can see the average, which makes sense, right? It's the average of the bin. I guess bin may not be the most useful, but it still might be valuable. The other thing we could do is we could then look at how many times was it in this bin. And so you could also drag the same variable temperature to size. And instead of sum, you could actually change this to be count of data. And so now we can start to see most of the time is at 72, some of the time is at 80, but very few. We only have 2,000 data points here. Here we have 154,000 data points as an example. So that's just another way to kind of look at data. We can also, you can actually, instead of, this is averaging all the dots at 60. I know that my data is about on the 1 minute timestamp. And so you can actually show all the dots, all the little tiny dots. I think they would all be stacked. Well, it would probably show a 5-degree spread. So let's drag date and time to the details category. And so if we put it there and we make this, I'm not sure how this is going to look, but if we set this to be minutes, it will make a plot for every minute dot that we have. I think a more useful way to see the value of this filter is, let's put time up here. And now let's change this. Let's make it an average day. So we're going to plot the hours. And so now, so I'm going to take a minute off. So you can see if there's nothing here, it'll just average every hour and show us every hour was 73 degrees. So, that's kind of interesting, but not super. It doesn't really tell us the spread. Like, well, how hot did it get at 10 o'clock out of all the data? And so that's where you can add this detail of time again, or another filter, and you can say, well, I want to see a detailed dot. I want to see an individual dot for every minute if you have data for it. And so now we can actually see there's a spread of data here. It plotted every single minute. And as I hover over it, I can start to see when those were. But I can start to see all the different temperatures. At one point it was 83. At one point it was 65. And so I can see the spread, right? I can start to see where that room was. You can even do statistics, lightweight statistics in Tableau, and look at the average or the median. You can click this analytics tab. Often what I like to do is just right click the axes and add a reference line. And here what I'm going to do very quickly is just use this box plot. And I believe this will work. So what that box plot did is it actually now shows me the spread of my data, and within the box is the median is in the middle, and then it shows me where a majority of my data lives. Sometimes I'll even make the data smaller, just so that box plot really stands out. You can even change the color of the data. So it's the same answer as the average, but now it helps tell a story of the range the data came in. So we covered a lot of little things there, right? We covered how to make bins. Every time you make bins, it will look at the data set you have and give recommendations on the size. We talked about how to plot different things together on the same chart. We looked at a little bit at these analytics steps. There's a lot more in here. You can add reference lines. You can't even do trend lines. But there's a lot here you can do. So I think that's about it. So that's kind of the next major thing. These tools pretty much represent the visual ways to use Tableau. Later on, we'll go over how to actually make calculated fields, how to add things together. One thing, just as a cursor to that, this data right now, even though it is adjacent and all in the same time step, well, really, these three columns are in the single CSV file. It's on the same time step. And so we can do equations between these three fields, but we cannot do equations right now between the rest of these fields and these, due to the fact that the data is not a full data table. And we'll talk about this later as we get into calculations. But with that, I'm going to go on to some data cleaning steps and talk a little bit about why and what is data cleaning. All right, thanks.